Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, friends, and welcome back.
It's Belle.
And is.
And this is...
Trigger warning.
And I have an episode today.
It's Beth's turn.
And this one's a disaster.
It's a doozy.
It is a doozy. It's actually going to be our very first two-parter.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this one's a biggin'. When I originally started researching, it was when we first started the podcast, and then I started looking into it, and I said, oh my gosh, it's too soon for a two-parter. We just started.
We gotta get them real interested first.
Yeah, we gotta get these people hooked on us, and then they'll stick around for a two-parter. So This is your two-parter, and we're gonna get started on it. Part 1 begins now. This is about Union Carbide.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, Union Carbide Company was founded in 1898.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Of course you can.
Are there any trigger warnings for this?
Oh, thank you. I almost forgot. That's the name of the podcast.
No, interesting. I used to always forget. Now I've finally remembered to say
I know,
them.
you did a good job. Wow, maybe I should start this whole thing over again.
No, don't.
Trigger warnings are death.
Okay.
Environmental catastrophe.
Okay. Yeah.
Child death.
Oh, man.
Mass death. Lots and lots of death.
So death. Pretty much death, people, and nature.
A lot of death and a lot of irresponsible company.
As it usually
and
is.
And greed.
Tag on it.
Okay.
Okay, please proceed.
So Union Carbide was founded in 1898.
Okay.
In November of 1917, Union Carbide merged with National Carbon Company, Lind Air Products Company, and the Prestolite Company.
Oh.
And the combination of these companies formed Union Carbide and Carbon Corporation. The researchers at Union Carbide and Carbon Corporation discovered an inexpensive way to make ethylene from liquid gas like propane.
Okay.
Liquid gas such as propane. This breakthrough was the beginning of the modern petrochemical business. In 1920, they created a chemicals division, and they began making antifreeze by using ethylene glycol.
Okay.
Over the years, they continued to buy other chemical-related businesses. In 1957, they changed their name to Union Carbide Corporation, but it was usually referred to as Carbide. And I'll be referring to it as Carbide here and there, and Union Carbide. Carbide most likely because it's fewer syllables
it's shorter,
and it's easier to say. And Carbide was active in the field of rocket propulsion research during the height of the Cold War. They dealt mostly with chemicals, plastics, and storable liquid fuels.
Wow.
But they have gotten their hands kind of in everything over the decades.
As a conglomerate does.
Yes. So Carbide has multiple locations throughout the U.S. and elsewhere in the world. Unfortunately, there have been accidents at several of these facilities, including the worst industrial accident in the U.S. and the worst industrial accident in the world.
Oh my, are you kidding? Would not want those titles.
I know, I'm like, you won the two worst. The U.S. and the world. So first we're going to talk about some of the less deadly events that have taken place.
Oh my gosh.
In 1957, an exploration geologist employed by Union Carbide was in California searching for mineral deposits for the company. Instead of finding nickel or other metallic ores, he noticed a white, quote-unquote, leathery mineral, which was eventually identified as chrysotile asbestos.
Oh, great.
Uh-huh.
You know, that's not going to come good.
Chrysotile?
We'll call
asbestos was used worldwide in the 1950s. It made up about 95% of asbestos use. This particular particle, though, had a unique physical form.
Tell us all about it.
The one that this specific geologist found.
It's leathery.
Yeah. The entire mining area, known as New Idria, contained this specific type only. Most mines contained a combination of chrysotile and other less useful forms of asbestos. And the fibers in this asbestos were all short grain and oriented in random directions, which made them more effective in the products that they would eventually become a part of. In the new Idria site, it was also determined that the rocks that were mined contained over 50% of this fiber.
Oh, wow. That's
This
a
is
lot.
compared to 6 to 10% found in the Canadian mines, which at the time was the largest producer of asbestos. So 50% versus 6 to 10% in the Canadian mines.
Wow.
So Union Carbide dubbed the asbestos Calidria, a combination of Cal from California and Idria from New Idria mining site. Calidria.
Okay.
So at the time and over the next couple of decades, the short fiber asbestos Calidria was considered safer than other long fiber types. It was used in everything: paint, roofing, flooring, construction mud, insulation, cement, piping and sheets, coatings and compounds, paper, plastics, textiles, adhesives, everything.
Basically, it's like what wasn't it in?
Right, exactly. It was believed at the time that the short fibers of asbestos, Calidria specifically, was less harmful to the lungs than other forms. According to a former mill worker, Art Valdez, their bosses told them that Carbide's asbestos was safe.
Oh my, that sounds like that
Mm-hmm.
Libby, Montana situation.
Uh-huh. He said that the workers, quote unquote, took the word of the company from day one.
That sounds like the other
Carbide
one too.
said that Calidria fibers were so small that they could easily be expelled from the lungs. But they insist that there were still warnings all up around the mill that workers should avoid breathing in the dust. In 2002 or 2004, depending on the source, Kelly Moore Paint Company sued Union Carbide. In court, Kelly Moore said that Carbide's sales reps told them not to worry and explained that Calidria was a safer alternative to other asbestos products. They said that Carbide had evidence linking Calidria to asbestosis and cancer, but hid the evidence from the buyers. Because Carbide sold it to Kelly Moore Paint Company, and then they used it in their paint, and then they were getting their asses sued off from people who used it and ended up with asbestosis or mesothelioma or something like that. Carbide said that it was Kelly Moore's responsibility to make sure the ingredients in their paint were non-toxic, not theirs. They also pointed out that they sold Calidria to Kelly Moore beginning in 1964, and that at that time there was publicly available information regarding the health hazards of asbestos. So Kelly Moore says that they were essentially told what the mill workers were told. Don't worry, it's not the bad stuff. But Carbide says that they are an easy target because every other company that produced and sold asbestos in the U.S. during that time, like when it was big and used in everything, has filed bankruptcy. Carbide is the only company that still exists today because they had so many other...
Because they did everything
They
else.
had their hands in every other pot, so when asbestos went away, they're like, okay, fine, we won't make that anymore. They make everything else. So they were like, we're an easy target for lawsuits because we're the only ones that still exist.
The audacity.
Yeah. Kelly Moore Paint Company had already defended themselves against lawsuits from individuals who'd used their products, and their suit against Carbide was partially to cover the millions of dollars that they had and would spend to cover claims.
Wow.
So they were suing them basically to cover claims they'd already paid and claims they knew would come later.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Union Carbide insisted in court that Calidria was safe. After all, according to them, no mill workers had ever been diagnosed with asbestos-related illness. So they said, oh, you knew the risks. We didn't say it was safe. But then in court they also said, but it's safe. Our mill workers didn't have any problems. So they were like, if the people that were milling and processing the asbestos weren't sick, then how could the people using the products down the line be sick from it? But Libby Moore's lawyer said that it wasn't true and was just another, quote, misrepresentation by Union Carbide. In fact, the lawyer, Mark Lanier, pointed out public and corporate records of cases of mill workers' lungs being negatively affected by Calidria. Lanier also said that a case in 1991 of a man who died after heart surgery was the catalyst for Libby Moore to sue Carbide.
Libby Moore?
Or, sorry, Kelly Moore.
Okay. I was like, okay.
I think it auto-corrected on my document. The mill hand's death certificate originally listed asbestosis as his cause of death.
Oh.
According to handwritten notes by the mill manager, Union Carbide questioned the death certificate, and then breathed a sigh of relief when the cause of death was changed to pulmonary fibrosis.
Well, they paid off somebody.
Of course, Carbide says they had nothing to do with the change on the death certificate.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. You can't. Come on.
I know.
Really?
Yeah.
Do they really think?
I know.
Do they really?
Allegedly. Do they really allegedly think that? Because they still exist.
Allegedly.
Don't sue us.
Don't come after us.
It's also important to point out, though, that the disease from asbestos exposure can take between 10 and 40 years to manifest. So that means even today, in 2025, people are just now discovering that they have mesothelioma or some other health issue related to asbestos exposure from decades ago.
Oh my gosh. I had no idea it could be all the way up to 40 years.
Oh yeah, 40, 50, 60, I saw in other sources 60 years. So according to a memo from 1975, Carbide's lawyers suggested putting, quote, cancer on the labels of Calidria. They said that the government would eventually mandate it, so Carbide should do so before that mandate came down. But Carbide decided against it, citing concerns over their bottom line. So Carbide said in this memo where the lawyers suggested using the word cancer, said, quote, "We cannot predict with certainty what effect the use of the proposed label, the cancer label, will have on our business, but the general feeling here is that it is likely to vary somewhere between serious and fatal." So, in other words, putting cancer on the label would destroy our business.
Well, what were they going to do if later on they knew that the government would make them do it anyway?
Because if the government said so, then they're like, we had to put it on there because it was a government mandate.
Okay, yeah.
Now, Union Carbide's safety sheets did list asbestos as a carcinogen, but I'm not sure if that was before or after this 1975 memo. And if it specified Calidria as a carcinogen or just asbestos in general.
Okay.
Another memo, this one from 1973, was from Dr. Kenneth Lane, the company's assistant medical director. In the memo, he accused Carbide of misrepresenting the safety of Calidria in a marketing paper. The marketing paper was titled The Safe Use of Calidria, RG-244. Dr. Lane said, quote, "The discussion of the varieties of asbestos are interesting, but irrelevant to the fact that all varieties produce disease."
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So Carbide claims that they changed the wording after Dr. Lane voiced his concerns. But I'm wondering if they put that in the marketing papers, their salespeople probably still used variations of the terminology, allegedly.
Right.
And Carbide's lawyer said, quote, "Nobody's perfect. You'll find bad paper in any big corporation. But we never, ever did the things we're being accused of in this courtroom." So at the end of it all, Kelly Moore lost and Union Carbide was found not guilty of misrepresenting the safety of its products.
Gosh, can you believe, I can believe it because we're talking about it,
yeah.
But.
Now, Union Carbide has paid its share of settlements related to its products. In June 2012, Carbide paid $37.5 million out of a $48 million settlement to a plaintiff in California and his wife. He worked as a contractor in the 60s and 70s and was diagnosed with mesothelioma in 2011. One key piece of evidence at the trial was an internal memo that proved that Carbide knew asbestos was harmful. Victor Trinchisi, I think, another mesothelioma patient, was awarded $2 million from Union Carbide. He had worked at Hunters Point Naval Shipyard from 1969 to 1980 as an electrician. He installed resin switches made by Bakelite, which Carbide had acquired in 1939. The switches contained a high amount of asbestos. In 2019, Willis Edenfield's estate was awarded $2.38 million. Willis had been diagnosed with mesothelioma and died from it in 2011. He had worked in a factory that received 40,000 pounds of Calidria asbestos during his 12 years of employment there.
Oh my gosh.
$24 million was awarded to the owner of a construction business in California. $6.6 million was awarded to a construction supervisor in Florida. $5.2 million was awarded to the daughter of a construction worker who developed mesothelioma. As a teenager, she would clean up dust left behind when her father sanded joint compound that contained asbestos from Carbide.
So she
this
might
was
end up
the
with
daughter of the construction worker who cleaned up after her father, and she got mesothelioma just from cleaning up after him.
I have no words.
Yeah. So, side note, today, the New Idria mines where Calidria came from and the surrounding area is considered unsafe due to mercury contamination, the presence of other metals like copper, zinc, arsenic, aluminum, and selenium, and of course, due to the abundance of asbestos there. So just FYI. It was so safe that the mill workers didn't get sick from it, but it is considered dangerous to be around
don't
there.
Go there.
Yeah, because there are heavy metals in the area, and there's also asbestos, so oops. Now we are going to go back in time a little to the 1930s.
Back in time.
Back in time. Union Carbide owned a steel plant called Electro-Metallurgical Company in a town that is known today as Alloy, West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Now, of course, the steel plant needed electricity, and Carbide decided to build a hydroelectric dam to produce the power they needed.
Okay, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So they began in 1925 by purchasing large plots of land for about 10 miles along the Kanawha River in South Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay.
On January 7th, 1927, New Kanawha Power Company was created. It was a subsidiary of Union Carbide that was owned solely by Union Carbide. The West Virginia Public Services Commission granted a permit to this New Kanawha Power Company, and if I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. Granted them a permit in 1929 to function as a quasi-public utility. Basically, Union Carbide was like, let's create this power company and then build a dam and then use the power ourselves. So
that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the chief engineer of the power company, Owen Jones, spent 7 years planning the Hawk's Nest project. What is this project, you might ask?
What is this project?
I'm glad you asked. The New River was about 1,000 feet upstream, 1,000 feet wide, which is 304 meters. Meaning that the water flow was steady, but nowhere near as fast as it needed to be to generate power. Basically, the plan was to build a 16,240 foot, 4,949 meter tunnel through Gauley Mountain.
A tunnel, you said?
A tunnel. Near the dam that they planned to build, the New River would narrow to around 100 feet.
That is a big difference.
Yes. The water would then be diverted through the tunnel, and it would, when it was going through the mountain, it would be a 162 or 49 meter drop in height going through the mountain. So narrowing the river and causing a drop in height would cause the water flow to increase.
Yeah.
And the speed and the volume of water would increase. And then it would be flowing at 10,800 cubic feet per second, which is about 305 cubic meters per second.
My brain can't even comprehend those numbers.
So very, very fast.
Very fast.
So when the water met up with the hydroelectric power station, the current would be strong enough to be used for to generate electricity.
Okay.
So basically, like I said, the entire project was to be done so that Union Carbide alone would benefit from having electricity for their steel plant. Union Carbide got 35 bids for the construction of the Hawk's Nest Tunnel.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And eventually they awarded the contract to Reinhardt and Dennis, a company out of Charlottesville, Virginia, that had plenty of experience and a good reputation. Union Carbide's engineers at New Kanawha Power Company would oversee the project. So their chief engineer designed the project, and they were overseeing the project. So Union Carbide designed the project and would oversee the project because they owned the power company. The contract with Reinhardt and Dennis had a few important provisions included. First, Reinhardt and Dennis had to build a hospital to support the thousands of workers that were needed. They never built one, by the way. Instead, there were 4 medical aid tents set up in the 4 dig locations. Injured workers would have to be taken to a hospital, the nearest of which was 14 miles away. Yeah. Second, Reinhardt and Dennis would be held liable for anything that happened at the job sites. They took responsibility for any injuries, deaths, etc.
That just sounds like...
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Also-
say it, but that just sounds like...
hinky.
It's hinky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the contract provided incentives to Reinhardt and Dennis for completing the project within 2 years. So a 16,000-foot tunnel
In a
through
mountain.
rock in a mountain in 2 years. They would pay the contractors $250 per day for each day that was completed ahead of schedule. Alternately, if the contractor went over the 2-year mark, then Reinhardt and Dennis would pay Union Carbide $250 per day for each day they went over the target date.
That
So,
is real
Yeah,
sneaky.
so they'd make
and
lots and lots of money if they got it done
snaky.
sooner, and they'd lose money if they went over the day.
That is a recipe right there for disaster.
Yeah. So the dam itself was begun by Reinhardt and Dennis in 1927. The tunnel was
Gosh,
started...
I forget it was so long ago.
Yeah. The tunnel was started on March 31st, 1930. They actually began work on 4 sections of the tunnel, which would eventually come together to form one long tunnel. So they had 4 sections that they were digging, and they would dig these 4 sections, and eventually they would all meet up. And actually, I read somewhere when they did meet, they were only off by like 1 inch.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's impressive.
I gotta say, that's
it actually
impressive.
is really impressive. So the tunnel was originally meant to be 32 to 36 feet in diameter, which is 9.7 to 10.9 meters in diameter. I tried to get as many of these as I could.
You're doing
switched
great.
over. But as the digging began, it was discovered that the mountain was loaded with high-grade silica, a mineral that Union Carbide could use in their smelting plant.
What?
Therefore, they changed the plans to include a 5,052-foot section that would be widened to 46 feet in diameter.
Ooh, that's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. So a 5,000-foot section would be widened another basically 10 to 12 feet. So they could have all that extra silica dug out. So while the workers dug the tunnel, they were also mining this silica.
Wouldn't that change the volume and pressure and everything of the water?
Yeah, but
Once it goes
probably
through-
because it wasn't the entire tunnel. I mean,
Okay.
it's a 16,000-foot tunnel, and only 5,000 feet of it is going to be wider.
And that's still a third, basically.
But
I don't know. That's crazy. Maybe
Yeah.
if it's in the middle, it wouldn't.
but it also got them silica,
And that's really
and
all
that made them
matters.
some money.
Yeah.
The silica was high grade, meaning it was 99.44% pure,
Wow.
as opposed to the 2 to 3% silica that comes from coal. So, because the project was licensed as a civil engineering project, not a mine, the workers were not provided with the same personal protective equipment that miners would have been given even back in the 30s. Because people knew mining was dangerous and that breathing in mining dust was dangerous.
There is so much wrong with all the things you have just told us about. There
Yeah.
is so much.
Yeah. Of course, Union Carbide, and therefore Reinhardt and Dennis, could have offered masks or wet drilling to protect the workers. But they didn't. Because masks cost money, and wet drilling is slower, which means that costs money too, because time is money. The workers weren't really aware of the hazards of silica or of mining in general, and that's because the workers weren't miners. The nearest town to the work sites was Gauley Bridge, West Virginia. Its population was mostly white, but the majority, about 75% of the tunnel workers, were black. That's because black men from the South had heard of good-paying jobs in West Virginia. They traveled there, they left their families behind, and they were willing to work and send money back home. Keep in mind, this is during the Great Depression.
Right, where you couldn't find anything.
The rate of unemployment in the U.S. during 1930 and 1931 was around 10 to 15%. In West Virginia, the unemployment rate was 40 to 50%.
Oh my gosh.
Finding a job anywhere was difficult, but finding one in West Virginia was, like, shocking. Like,
And
it was
especially to
impossible.
find one that would actually pay you
Yeah.
decent amount of money.
So the fact that black men from the South were a majority of the workers proves that the contractors sought out black workers.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds nice that they were giving black men the opportunity to work, but it wasn't out of kindness.
We know better.
So the black men would come and they were thinking they'd be working in coal mines. When they got there, they were surprised that they were digging a tunnel.
Well, yeah, because West Virginia is kind of known for
Or coal mining.
coal mining.
So, but they were too desperate for a good paying job, so they couldn't walk away from it. So they stayed and they were like, okay, I'll dig the tunnel. So the black men were assigned the dirty and dangerous jobs, which meant they were the ones working deep in the tunnel. Major point, they got paid less than their white counterparts. White men were paid with cash, where the black men were paid with company scrip, which could only be used at the company store. We've talked about that before. If the black men needed to exchange scrip for cash to send home to their families, there was a 10% surcharge. Black workers had to pay 75 cents a week for treatment by the company doctor or the hospital. White men only paid 50 cents a week for the same. All workers paid 25 cents a week for coal, even if they didn't use it. The tunnel workers lived in makeshift camps constructed by the contractor Reinhardt and Dennis. Their, quote, housing consisted of 12 by 14 foot shacks. This is a 3.6 by 4.3 meters. The shacks had wooden frames and rested on stone piers, and they were covered with a low-pitched roof, and the windowless sides were wrapped with tar paper. White workers lived 4 to a shack and had electricity in the form of a single light bulb. The black men had no electricity and had 2 levels of 2-person wide bunks. The black men shared their shacks with 8 to 15 other men.
How did they even fit in there?
Sometimes they shared bunks, rotating between men on different shifts. Somebody would use it, and then when he got up to go on shift, another man that just finished his shift would come in and lay down. When the men, quote, moved in, the shacks were otherwise empty. They were given nothing, basically. The men had to use company scrip to buy coal for heating, linens, and even a stove from the company store. So, and all those men cramped together, they were sweaty, they were covered in dust, and there were no showers or anything available for any of the workers.
So they couldn't even get clean? Like wash their hands or anything, really?
No. There was nothing. No. So they carried that dusting on them, too, and they're sweating and, yeah.
And stayed dirty all the time.
Yeah. I guess they could have at some point gone down to the river and cleaned off some, but...
They don't have time and they're probably exhausted.
Probably. And to make matters worse, Reinhardt and Dennis employed men called shack rousters. These men were armed and would invade the shacks and force the men to hurry to work. And they kind of acted as like a police force in the camps and at the work site. And the workers said that they sometimes worked with guns pointed at their backs. And these men were particularly hard on the black men, the black workers. So, for all those reasons, we can see why the black Southerners were recruited to work on the project.
Mm-hmm.
And for Reinhardt and Dennis, they needed as many people as they could get, and the labor of the black men would simply cost them less money in every way possible. They paid them less, they had to pay more for everything that they got,
mm-hmm.
and there were always more people looking for money, looking for a job. So, they wanted to get the job done, they wanted to get it done quickly, and I guess within the amount they quoted in their bid, and they had incentives to get it done quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the tunneling process used was called benched mining / tunneling, because it wasn't mining, but it was. I'm not an engineer or a miner by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to briefly explain what this means.
Please do, because I have never heard this before.
You can pull up diagrams online, but in each one of the 4 sections of the tunnel, a crew would wet drill horizontally into the open face. So basically they just drill into the dirt, the tunnel. Yeah. Okay. And wet drilling basically just means that water would be sprayed at the area too. Mm-hmm. That is why it was safer to wet drill, because it kept the dust down.
Right.
But
water. They didn't like that because it was going to take longer.
It takes longer. But this was just like they would wet drill into the face.
This.
Yeah.
Okay.
The horizontal drills needed the water to remove the debris.
Okay, I gotcha.
So, black workers were assigned to carry steel to the drillers and remove the debris, which is called mucking. As I mentioned before, this was the dirtiest and the deadliest job in the tunnel. So, also, the debris was removed from the tunnel by small gas-fueled rail cars called dinkies.
I'm sorry, that's funny.
And the carbon monoxide fumes from the dinkies caused 12 to 16 workers per day to have to be carried out of the tunnels. So they would get the carbon monoxide fumes from the cars would cause people to pass out. They were getting poisoned by these dinkies. Anyway, so while the wet drills were working on the horizontal boring, other crews would dry drill about 12 to 20 feet vertically into the bench, which was just like the horizontal layer.
Okay.
The horizontal drilling would always stay about 10 feet ahead of the vertical driller. Workers would drill the holes, then pack them with dynamite, and then clear out of the mine. Dynamite would be ignited, they would blast through the rocks,
and then start all over?
So then the workers from the next shift were supposed to start about 2 hours later to allow time for the dust to settle. But most of the time, they were forced to go into the tunnel only about 30 minutes after the dynamite blast. When they did, the dust was so thick they could only see about 3 to 5 feet ahead of them.
Say they wouldn't even be able to see where they were going.
Exactly.
Or what they were doing.
The time-saving methods that they used worked. The project was eventually completed 10 weeks early.
So they made that money.
But turnover was high for the tunnel workers. And it wasn't because the men disliked the job or were frustrated at getting paid less, though I'm sure those things are true. Instead, it was because the mining and tunneling through silica-filled rock was deadly. We've already talked about asbestos in this episode and in our previous episode about Libby, Montana. Asbestos and silica are similar in the way they affect someone's health. Since the men didn't wear masks, they were breathing in the dust that contained silica. The contractor and the new Kanawha Power company knew silica was dangerous. This is obvious by the fact that the inspectors and the supervisors sent to check out the tunnel were absolutely 100% wearing masks.
They always know.
Yeah.
They always know.
Since the black workers had the dirtiest, dustiest jobs, they were the ones that suffered the most. Along with lack of masks, respiratory equipment, and ventilation, there were no showers, so the men carried the dust back to the shacks. Like asbestos, silica was breathed into the lungs where the crystalline mineral cut into the lung tissue from the inside.
That sounds horrendous.
So, the respiratory disease caused by silica inhalation is called silicosis. Like asbestosis.
Original.
Yeah. Symptoms of silicosis in early stages include cough, fatigue, chest tightness, and shortness of breath. In advanced stages, they may experience severe shortness of breath, even when at rest, wheezing, cyanosis, which is bluish coloring of the skin due to lack of oxygen, lung infections like tuberculosis, and lung cancer. Eventually, the West Virginia Department of Mines did push Reinhardt and Dennis to install ventilation, but they never forced the issue regarding the masks. They did tell Reinhardt and Dennis to provide respiratory devices to the workers, but the company basically just ignored them.
And they didn't enforce it.
No. And that's probably because they saw how many black workers were working there, and
they
probably
didn't
just
care.
didn't care. Yeah. Reinhardt and Dennis, ever the penny pinchers, installed a ventilation duct that was only 24 inches in diameter and was attached to an 18-inch fan. The tube was made out of canvas, so it was easily torn by rocks and debris. But the company assured the West Virginia Department of Mines that the ventilation duct provided 7,000 cubic feet per minute of fresh air. Yeah, right.
Come on.
Even though it had holes in the canvas tubing. Without masks and proper ventilation, only 40% of underground workers were there for more than 2 months. Only 20% lasted 6 months. And only 2% of the 5,000 men hired to work on the tunnel were there for the entirety of the project. That's how many people kept dying.
I have no words for that.
Workers would die after only a few weeks of work. The ones that were still alive but too sick to work would be kicked out of the company housing and would end up in Gauley Bridge, the town nearby, where they would later die of silicosis. This happened so frequently that Gauley Bridge earned the nickname, quote, the town of the living dead. Obviously, white men died from silicosis as well, but since 75% of the workforce was black, and the black men did the jobs that exposed them to silicosis the most, or to the silica the most, it was largely the black men that died from the racist and uncaring companies that hired them. The men were often told they had tunnelitis, or that they had tuberculosis or pneumonia. They were given useless pills called Little Black Devils that contained baking soda coated with raw sugar. I guess they were given that so they'd stop complaining, so that they would think that they were being treated. The first semi-official death count was 300, with another 1,500 that were diagnosed with silicosis. Most of the known deaths were from acute silicosis, but the real number of deaths is hard to gauge. Union Carbide hid or destroyed records of the employees. This was also before Social Security numbers, so individual workers were impossible to track. When the tunnel was finished in September 1931, the workers were dismissed. The men had come from all over, so tracking them down to find out about their health was nearly impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them had chronic silicosis and died months or years after exposure. An epidemiologist that wrote a book about the disaster estimated that 764 people died due to silicosis. In 2002, a report by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health estimated the death toll at 1,000. The number of men who died is sad. What's more sad is the way the death of the black workers was handled. Only 10 bodies of the black workers from the South were shipped home to North Carolina or Virginia, according to the records that were kept. Only 10 of the black men were shipped back home to their loved ones.
Wonder why those 10 were.
I don't know. Hundreds of others were treated in a disgusting way. So at first they were simply just put in the river and covered by rocks from the tunnel. Just put in the river and covered up.
What?
Later, Reinhardt and Dennis hired a local undertaker, Hadley White, to bury the black workers. They paid him $55 per body that he buried. Hadley buried the men in an old slave cemetery behind a local church. The men were buried with no grave markers or any way to identify who was buried where. When the cemetery had no room left, Hadley stacked the bodies, quote, like cordwood, in a truck and drove them 40 miles to Somerville, West Virginia. He buried the men without coffins, usually in canvas bags and the clothes they died in. Many were buried the same day they died, within hours of their deaths. Again, no grave markers. And no effort was made to notify the family members of the deceased men. A total of 169 men were buried in Somerville, with more than one body per grave and without death certificates. The few that had death certificates had the wrong cause of death listed on them. They usually had tuberculosis, pneumonia, or tunnelitis on them, the same conditions they lied to the men about having. In 1972, West Virginia State Road 19 was set to be expanded, so work began on excavating the farm of Martha White. Martha White was Hadley White's mother. They discovered indentations in the earth and found the bodies of the 169 men buried there. So a contractor exhumed the bodies and moved them to Whippoorwill Field, where they were forgotten. Whippoorwill was used over the decades as an unofficial dump, with people dumping old appliances and roadkill in the area.
Oh, that is awful.
In 2012, a local newspaper publisher named Charlotte Yeager found the site and cleaned it up. Using radar, they found the graves of the men and put markers up for each. And on September 7th, 2012, a service was held where they read the names of the men who were known, and the grounds were consecrated by 3 ministers.
That is so nice.
And I'm sure some people might say, but Bev, this is really sad, but Union Carbide didn't cause this. They hired a contractor. They're the ones that should take the blame for this. But keep in mind, Union Carbide and its subsidiary, the new Kanawha Power Company, planned the entire project and oversaw its completion. They knew the rock in that mountain was packed with silica because they had taken core samples before the project began. They designed the tunnel, including its diameter, and then decided to widen it, turning the construction of the tunnel into a mining situation, without offering more money to Reinhardt and Dennis for the change in operations. They supervised the operations, so they saw the workers were dying and that the black men were being treated differently than the white ones.
Mm-hmm.
And they offered incentives for the contractor to work quickly and finish early if possible. They knew that those incentives would cause Reinhardt and Dennis to cut corners, which is why they included the provision in the contract that Reinhardt and Dennis take on any liability from the project. They knew.
That was freaking smart of them.
Obviously, Reinhardt and Dennis are partially responsible too, and not just because it says so in the contract. Union Carbide, New Kanawha Power Company, and Reinhardt and Dennis, none of them ever measured the dust levels in the tunnel, despite there being technology available to do so. And Reinhardt and Dennis only tested twice for carbon monoxide during the entire 17 to 18 months of digging. And we know there was some there because the dinghies had 12 to 16 people a day passing out.
Yeah.
So, Reinhardt and Dennis, yes, they were the contractor. They treated people terribly. but they were incentivized
to do so.
to hurry up.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, Union Carbide knew. They put those incentives in there. They knew that the contractor would cut corners so they could make their bid and make it in time or early. And that's why they put that stipulation in there that they took all the liability. Because they were like, if people start dying because they cut corners, safety corners or whatever, we don't want it coming back on us.
Right.
Allegedly. So, we've been told about a couple of instances of Union Carbide having allegedly been real dicks and caring about money instead of people's lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But there's more. But you're going to have to wait for that.
No!
So, that is the end of the first part.
We want more! We want more!
So, we are going to record a second part. This part's going to come out on Wednesday, of course. The second part we're going to put out on Sunday, so you only have to wait like 3 days instead of an entire week.
That is so nice of us.
Because we love you, and that's what we're going to do because we're the bosses here.
That's right.
So, and you only have to wait 3 days before you can hate on them some more.
Yay!
Yay! All right. So, if you want to hate on them, via email, you can email us at triggerwarning411@gmail.com. You can hop on Facebook and tell us about how horrible they were allegedly at TW Podcast, hosted by Bev and Diz. And we will have another episode coming out on Sunday, so don't miss that. And make sure that you, follow us or subscribe or whatever.
All the things.
Also download episodes, because that's how it makes us known. And rate us.
Please.
Because we want to be famous.
I mean, really, we just...
Not really, but we want
just
people to hear us.
The stories out there.
Yeah, because it's fun.
It's interesting.
We're really having fun doing it.
We are.
And we want everybody to enjoy it.
We appreciate you guys coming back.
Yeah.
Every week.
So we'll catch you on the flip side, okay?
All right, guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Watch for deer.